Hello and welcome. You have found your way here to this quiet place, a space created just for this moment, a space for rest. There is nothing at all required of you now, no tasks to complete, no problems to solve, nowhere you need to be, except for right here, settling into the comfort you have made for yourself. So let us begin by settling in completely. Take this moment to notice the position of your body, making any small adjustments that might bring you just a little more ease, perhaps shifting your shoulders or moving your pillow just so. Feel the gentle weight of the blankets upon you, a soft, reassuring pressure. Feel the surface beneath you, the mattress, the bed, rising up to meet you, to support you entirely. You do not need to hold yourself up. You can let go. Let us begin by bringing a gentle awareness to the body, starting with your feet. Simply notice them at the far end of the bed. Feel the gentle pressure of the blankets on them. Allow your feet, your ankles and your toes to feel heavy and soft and completely at ease. Allow that feeling of gentle heaviness to drift upwards into your lower legs. Feel your calves and shins releasing any tension they might be holding from the day. Feel the stillness around your knees. There is nowhere to walk to, nothing to do. Just rest. Now let that soft, warm feeling of relaxation move further up into your thighs and your hips, letting them sink deeper into the mattress. Notice your lower back and give it permission to release, to let go of its work of supporting you. It is fully supported now. Bring your awareness to your stomach and your chest. With each gentle breath, feel them rise and fall in a slow, easy rhythm. The rhythm of deep rest. And now to your hands. Notice where they are resting. Allow your fingers to soften, to uncurl. Let your hands feel heavy and warm. That feeling of ease now flows up through your arms, into your shoulders. Allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears, to release any burdens they have been carrying. Let the muscles of your neck soften. And now your jaw. Allow it to be slack and heavy. Let there be a small space between your teeth. Finally, bring your awareness to your face. Let the tiny muscles around your eyes soften. Let your forehead be smooth and clear. All of the expressions you have worn throughout the day can now melt away, leaving only a feeling of serene stillness. And now, let us turn our attention once more to the breath. There is no need to change it, simply to notice it. A simple, natural rhythm. Let's take a slow, quiet breath in together, filling your lungs without effort, and then a long, slow, sighing breath out, letting go of the day just a little more. If any thoughts should bubble up, as they often do, that is perfectly all right. There is no need to fight them or to follow them. Simply acknowledge them, like clouds passing in a distant sky, and then gently return your focus to the sound of my voice, or to the simple, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You are safe here. You are comfortable. You are ready for rest. And now that you have found this place of quiet stillness, our journey can begin. A slow, meandering story, designed to carry you gently into the peaceful landscape of your own dreams. Our journey begins long before the first pages of history were ever written. Let us drift back in time, past the age of kings and empires, past the first cities of clay and stone, and into the deep, green, silent world of our earliest ancestors. Imagine a time when the entire world was a vast, untamed wilderness, a world without maps, where every forest was a mystery, and every mountain range was the edge of the known universe. For the small bands of hunter-gatherers who moved through this landscape, survival depended on a single crucial skill, a deep and intimate knowledge of the natural world. Their lives were a slow, multi-generational project of learning and observation. The earth itself was the great library, and its lessons were taught through patience, through trial, and often through error. They learned to read the subtle language of the land. They learned that the curve of a particular branch meant the wood was strong and flexible, perfect for a bow. They learned that the fibres of the nettle plant, once carefully stripped and processed, could be woven into strong cordage. They learned that the flint found by the riverbed could be knapped to create a razor-sharp edge for a tool. This knowledge extended to every plant. They catalogued the world with their senses. They learned which roots, when dug from the damp earth, were starchy and nourishing. They learned which bright red berries were sweet and safe to eat, and which others, though they looked identical, contained a swift and deadly poison. They learned which broad leaves could be used to wrap food for cooking, and which barks, when boiled, could soothe a fever. This was the first human science, a vast and vital encyclopedia of what was useful, what was food, and what was dangerous. But in this slow, patient exploration of the world, they must have stumbled upon a third category of plants, a group that fit neither into the category of simple food nor that of deadly poison. These were plants that held a secret, plants that, when eaten or burned or brewed, did something else entirely. They opened a door to a different kind of perception. The discovery of these properties was likely not a deliberate search, but a series of quiet, momentous accidents. Imagine a man, tormented by the deep, throbbing ache of a broken tooth. In his search for relief, he chews on a strange, bitter leaf he has not tried before. He is not seeking a vision, only an end to his pain. And slowly, miraculously, he finds it. The sharp, piercing agony recedes, replaced by a strange, numb and distant feeling. The pain is still there, but it is no longer his. He has discovered a medicine, a plant that can quiet suffering. Or picture a shaman, a wise elder of a tribe, observing the world with a keen and patient eye. He watches a herd of reindeer feeding on a patch of distinctive red-capped mushrooms with white spots. Afterwards, he sees the animals behave strangely, leaping and running in a way that seems almost ecstatic. He's a student of animal behaviour, and he makes a note of this. He approaches the strange mushrooms with a deep sense of caution and reverence. He understands that they contain a powerful spirit, a force that must be approached with immense respect. His first experiments would be careful, perhaps involving just a tiny piece of the mushroom, consumed in a safe and controlled ritual. Or perhaps, in a small enclosed shelter during a harsh winter, a family is suffering from a sickness that makes them cough. To stay warm, they burn various dried plants they have gathered. One evening, they throw a handful of a particular dried herb onto the fire. As the smoke fills the small space, they notice something remarkable. Their coughing subsides. A deep feeling of calm settles over them. The anxieties of their difficult existence seem to soften, to drift away with the fragrant smoke. They have found not just a medicine, but a source of peace. These discoveries would have been moments of profound awe. These were not ordinary plants. They were sacred. They held a power that was not of this world, a key that could unlock a different state of being. The knowledge of these plants, how to find them, how to prepare them safely, and how to use them, would have become the domain of the shaman, the healer, the wise woman. It was a sacred trust. The use of these substances was not for idle pleasure. It was woven into the very fabric of early spiritual life. They were used to commune with ancestors, to seek guidance from spirits, to heal the sick, and to understand the great mysteries of life and death. This ancient impulse, this quiet, reverent relationship between humanity and a select few powerful plants, set the stage for all that was to come. It was here, in the firelight of ancient caves and the silence of primeval forests, that our long and complicated story truly begins. From the quiet reverence of the prehistoric world, we now turn to the first great civilizations and to the first sacred plant to be named, praised, and worshipped in written history. Our journey takes us to the windswept plains of ancient Central Asia, more than 4,000 years ago, and follows the path of a migrating people, the Indo-Aryans. They were a society of nomadic pastoralists, warriors, and poets, whose lives were deeply intertwined with their herds of cattle, the open sky, and a complex spiritual world filled with powerful gods. Over many centuries, these people composed, memorized, and passed down a vast collection of sacred oral poems. These were not simple songs, but intricate and beautiful hymns of praise, of philosophy, and of ritual instruction. Eventually they would be written down, becoming one of humanity's oldest surviving sacred texts, the Rig Veda. And within the thousands of verses that make up the Rig Veda, one figure appears again and again with a unique and profound prominence. It is a god, a plant, and a sacred drink, all sharing a single name, Soma. Soma was not merely a tool for ritual, it was considered a living deity, one of the most important in the entire Vedic pantheon. It was praised with the same reverence as Agni, the god of fire, and Indra, the great god of thunder and war who, according to the hymns, drew his immense strength from drinking the sacred Soma libation. An entire section of the Rig Veda, the ninth mandala, is a collection of over 100 hymns dedicated entirely to Soma, a testament to its absolute centrality in their spiritual lives. The language of these hymns is filled with a sense of awe and wonder. They describe Soma not as a simple plant, but as a king, a celestial sage, and a divine warrior who vanquishes darkness. They call it the Lord of the Stream and the elixir of immortality. The poets who composed these verses saw the plant as a physical manifestation of a cosmic power, a tangible link between the world of mortals and the realm of the gods. The hymns paint a picture of Soma's character through vivid, often paradoxical imagery. It is described as a golden-hued plant, its stalks shining like the sun. Yet it is also called a child of the mountains, found in remote, high-altitude places. It is a wild and powerful force of nature, yet its spirit can be captured and controlled through careful, methodical ritual. For the Vedic poets, or rishis, drinking Soma was the source of their inspiration. They believed it opened their minds, allowing them to perceive the underlying truths of the cosmos. One hymn declares, "We have drunk Soma and become immortal. We have attained the light, the gods discovered." It was seen as a vehicle for transcendence, a way to move beyond the confines of the physical body and experience a state of divine consciousness. The words of the hymns themselves were believed to be born from the clarity of vision that Soma provided. For the warriors, it was a source of immense physical strength and courage before battle. The hymns describe Indra drinking vast quantities of Soma to gain the power needed to slay the great cosmic serpent, Vritra, an act which released the waters and brought life to the world. For them, Soma was a drink of divine power, imbuing the mortal body with a god's vitality. And yet, for all the rich, poetic detail about its effects and its divine nature, the hymns remain tantalizingly vague about the physical appearance of the plant itself. It is described without roots, without leaves, without branches in the way a normal plant would be. This profound mystery has led to centuries of quiet academic debate. What was this plant that inspired one of the world's great religions? The hymns give us the spirit of Soma, but the body remains a shadow. To understand it further, we must leave the realm of pure poetry and enter the sacred space of the ritual itself. We must follow the hands of the priests as they perform the slow, methodical, and patient work of transforming the raw, wild plant into the shining, golden drink of the gods. The hymns of the Rig Veda give us a glimpse into the profound spiritual importance of Soma, but they do more than just offer praise. They also serve as a guide, a sacred instruction manual for the ritual that stood at the very heart of their religious life. The power of the plant was not something to be taken lightly or consumed carelessly. Its divine essence had to be unlocked, drawn out through a slow, patient, and deeply methodical process. Let us imagine the scene. The sun has not yet risen. The air is cool and still, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from a distant fire. The ritual takes place not in a grand temple, but in a specially prepared sacred enclosure, open to the vast starry sky. A fire, representing the god Agni, flickers on a low altar, casting a gentle dancing light on the faces of the priests. They are dressed in simple, clean garments, and their movements are not rushed, but deliberate and full of purpose. Before them lie the tools of their sacred work, a set of large, smooth stones, several wooden vats and bowls, and a cloth of pure white wool. The ceremony begins with the pressing of the Soma stalks. The priest would take the golden-hued plant, brought down from the mountains, and lay its stems upon a large, flat, slightly concave stone that served as the lower press stone. Then, holding smaller, heavier stones in their hands, they would begin to pound the plant. This was not an act of brute force, but a rhythmic and coordinated effort. As they worked, their voices would rise in a low, resonant chant, reciting the hymns dedicated to the very plant they were preparing. The sound of the stones striking the stalks, a steady, percussive thud, 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 would echo in the pre-dawn quiet, a holy drumbeat calling forth the spirit of the god. They were not merely crushing a plant, they were, in their belief, slaying the king Soma to release his immortal essence for the benefit of gods and men. With each rhythmic impact, the fibrous stalks would bruise and break, slowly releasing their precious juice. The hymns describe this process with poetic detail, speaking of the stones as the Soma-crushing teeth of the devout. The priest would work patiently, methodically, ensuring every part of the plant was thoroughly pressed, until the stalks were reduced to a damp, fragrant pulp, and the surface of the great stone glistened with the liberated golden liquid. The next stage was one of purification. The priest would take pure water drawn from a nearby stream and ceremonially pour it over the crushed plant matter. This was done to wash out every last trace of the divine juice, to ensure that none of its power was lost. As the water mingled with the pulp, the priests might continue their work with the stones, a gentler washing motion now, a final act of separation. Now came the most crucial step of the refinement process, the filtering. A cloth of clean white sheep's wool was stretched taut across the opening of a large wooden vat. This was the sacred filter, the eternal fleece, as the hymns describe it. With great care, the priests would gather the watery, pulpy mixture and pour it slowly onto the centre of the wool. What followed was a moment of quiet patience. The liquid would not rush through. Instead, it would percolate slowly, drop by drop, through the dense, intricate fibres of the fleece. The wool acted as a fine sieve, trapping all the solid plant matter, the crushed stems and fibres, while allowing the purified liquid to pass through. The priest would watch this slow transformation in meditative silence, observing the shining stream of Soma as it began to collect in the vat below. The sound would be a gentle, almost silent dripping, a quiet whisper in the sacred space. The resulting liquid in the vat was the pure essence of Soma, brilliantly clear and golden in the flickering firelight. But the ritual was not yet complete. In its pure form, the drink was considered too powerful, its spirit too wild. It needed to be clothed or adorned to be made gentle enough for consumption. In the final stage, a priest would take this purified Soma juice and slowly mix it with other nourishing ingredients. Sometimes it was fresh, white milk from a sacred cow, which would turn the golden liquid into a creamy, opalescent draught. Other times it was yogurt, or a handful of roasted barley grains, which would be stirred into the mixture. This act of admixture was a final taming of the god, a blending of its wild, celestial power with the gentle, life-sustaining products of the earth. The first portion of this final, sacred drink would be offered as a libation, poured into the sacred fire as a gift for the other gods. Only then, with the ritual complete and the gods honoured, would the priests themselves partake. This complex, careful, multi-stage process of pounding, washing, filtering and mixing tells us a great deal. It suggests that the Soma plant was something that could not be simply eaten raw, but required a specific and elaborate preparation to unlock its power and make it safe. The very complexity of the ritual provides our first and most important clue in the quiet historical search for its true identity. The ritual of Soma, with its precise and unvarying steps, tells us a great deal about the reverence the ancient Indo-Iranians held for their sacred drink. but it also provides us with a series of quiet, practical clues. The need for such a laborious process, of intense pounding, of washing, of meticulous filtering through wool, and of admixture with other ingredients, strongly suggests that the original Soma plant was not something that could be simply chewed or brewed like a simple tea. It was a substance that required transformation to unlock its power and perhaps to make it safe. For over a century, this very fact has fueled a quiet and fascinating academic debate. Scholars, historians, and botanists have become botanical detectives, poring over the ancient verses of the Rig Veda and its Persian counterpart, the Avesta, searching for clues. They have cross-referenced the poetic descriptions with the living plants of the Central Asian highlands, trying to find a match. The true identity of Soma is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world, and while we may never know the definitive answer, the search itself takes us on a slow and winding journey. The most enduring and widely, though not universally accepted candidate for the original Soma is a humble-looking shrub from the genus Ephedra. It is not a majestic tree or a brilliant flower, but a hardy, wiry plant with a tangle of slender, jointed yellowish-green stems. It has no true leaves, giving it a stark, almost skeletal appearance. It thrives in the dry, high-altitude, mountainous regions of Asia, the very same geography that the Vedic hymns describe as Soma's home. The evidence for Ephedra is practical and compelling. The stems, when dried, match the tawny or golden-hued descriptions in the texts. The plant contains the alkaloid ephedrine, a well-known stimulant. Consuming a drink made from these stems could certainly produce feelings of alertness, energy and vitality, which aligns with the hymns that describe Soma giving strength to warriors and vigour to the gods. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, there is a living tradition. The Zoroastrian religion, which shares a common ancient root with Vedism, still uses a plant in its rituals today. They call it hauma, which is linguistically the same as Soma, and the plant they use has been identified as a species of ephedra. This continuity over thousands of years is a powerful argument. And yet, for some scholars, a question lingers. The effects of ephedra are relatively mild, a stimulant not entirely unlike strong coffee. Does this fully account for the transcendent language of the Rig Veda? Does a simple boost of energy explain the verses that speak of becoming immortal, of seeing the gods, of achieving the light, and of the cosmos unfolding in the mind of the poet? For some, the effects of ephedra seem too mundane to have inspired such profound and ecstatic devotion. They believe the answer must lie with a plant that possessed a different kind of power. This leads us to the second major candidate, a more controversial and dramatic possibility: the fly agaric mushroom, Amanita muscaria. This is the iconic mushroom of folklore, a brilliant blood-red or deep orange cap, speckled with white warts. It emerges from the forest floor, a shocking jewel of colour against the dark earth. This theory, championed by researchers in the mid-20th century, suggests we should take the hymn's more unusual descriptions literally. The evidence for the mushroom is compelling in a different way. The hymns describe Soma as having no leaves, no branches, and no roots, but having a head and a stem, a perfect description of a mushroom. The pressing of the plant makes sense, as the mushroom's flesh would need to be crushed to release its compounds, and the meticulous filtering through wool takes on a new significance. The fly agaric can be toxic, causing unpleasant side effects. Some scholars have argued that the ritual filtering was a way to purify the juice. More pointedly, this theory addresses the powerful, vision-inducing effects described in the hymns. The active compounds in the Amanita muscaria mushroom are known to produce profound changes in perception, states of ecstasy, and vivid hallucinations. This aligns much more closely with the descriptions of seeing the gods and the fabric of the universe than the simple stimulation of ephedra. It offers an explanation for the sheer level of divine reverence given to Soma. But this theory also has its challenges. Was the mushroom readily available in all the regions inhabited by the Indo-Iranians? And the most controversial aspect of the theory suggests that the active compounds pass through the body chemically unaltered. This has led to the hypothesis that a key part of the ritual may have involved some consuming the mushroom, while others drank the urine of the first person to receive a filtered, less toxic dose. While this practice has been documented in other shamanic cultures, there is no direct, unambiguous evidence for it in the Rig Veda. And so the mystery endures. Was Soma the humble, stimulating ephedra shrub whose tradition has perhaps survived for 4,000 years? Or was it the brilliant visionary Amanita mushroom, whose use was a more potent and perhaps more hidden secret? Or was it another plant entirely, one that has since gone extinct or whose identity is forever lost to us? Perhaps the answer does not lie in a single specimen. Perhaps the true power of Soma was not just in the chemistry of the plant, but in the profound faith of the people who prepared it, in the sacred power of the ritual itself, in the rhythmic chanting of the hymns, and in the deep human yearning to touch the face of the divine. The search continues, a quiet echo in the long corridors of history. While the true nature of Soma remains a puzzle wrapped in ancient poetry, our journey now brings us to another sacred plant, one whose history is less mysterious, thanks to the writings of a curious traveller. We must leave the world of the Veda and step into the mind of Herodotus, the great Greek writer from the 5th century BCE, often called the father of history. He was an insatiably curious man who journeyed to the edges of the known Greek world, documenting the customs and beliefs of the barbarian peoples he encountered. In his great work, The Histories, he turns his attention to the Scythians. Imagine these people, a fierce and formidable culture of nomadic horsemen. They did not build cities of stone. Their home was the vast, treeless sea of grass that stretched for thousands of miles across Central Asia. They were masters of the horse and the bow, a people whose lives were a constant migration, following their herds, their entire world packed into wagons and carried with them across the endless plains. Herodotus describes many of their customs, but he pays special attention to a ritual they performed for purification, specifically after the funeral of a king. It was a ceremony to cleanse themselves of the grief and spiritual stain of death. This was not a recreational activity, but a solemn and necessary rite. He asks us to picture the process. The Scythians would begin by constructing a small enclosed tent. They would take 3 long poles and drive their ends into the earth, angling them inwards until they met at a point at the top, forming a simple, stable tripod. Then they would take heavy, thick sheets of woolen felt, the same material they used for their larger dwellings, and stretch them tightly around this frame, overlapping them carefully to ensure the small space within was as sealed and airtight as possible. Inside this small, dark, conical tent, a large dish, perhaps made of bronze or clay, would be placed on the ground. This dish would be filled with stones. Outside, a great bonfire would be blazing. The Scythians would place the stones from the dish into the heart of the fire, leaving them there until they glowed a dull, menacing red with intense heat. With the preparations complete, the participants would crawl into the small felt tent, sealing the entrance flap behind them, plunging themselves into a close and intimate darkness. Then, other members of the tribe would carefully carry the red-hot stones from the fire and place them into the dish in the centre of the tent. The air inside the tiny space would immediately become intensely hot, and then the ritual would reach its peak. One of the men would take a pouch containing what Herodotus calls hemp seed. While modern historians believe this was more likely the dried flowering tops of the cannabis plant, which are far more potent, we can picture him holding these small, dark seeds. He would cast a handful of the seeds directly onto the glowing hot stones. Herodotus writes that the effect was immediate. A sharp, hissing sound would fill the tent as the seeds made contact with the intense heat. Instantly, a thick aromatic vapour would rise, filling the small enclosed space. He notes that no Greek steam bath can exceed this. The air would become dense with a pungent, sweet and unfamiliar smoke. And then came the reaction. Herodotus, ever the fascinated observer, notes that the Scythians, enclosed in their tent and inhaling this thick vapour, would begin to shout. He describes it as a howl of delight, a cry of joyous ecstasy. We can imagine this sound not as the laughter of a party, but as a deep cathartic ritualistic release, a letting go of grief, a purification of the spirit, a moment of profound shared experience in the hot, fragrant darkness. Through Herodotus's clear and dispassionate account, we are given a rare, direct window into the ancient past. We see a nomadic people using the power of a plant not for idle pleasure, but as a central part of a solemn ritual to contend with one of life's greatest mysteries, death itself. This powerful, vaporous rite of the steppes stands in stark contrast to the quiet medicinal path the same plant was taking, far away in the settled and ancient civilization of China. As the Scythians howled with ritual joy in their vapour-filled tents, the same plant was being cultivated for entirely different purposes far to the east. In the fertile river valleys of ancient China, a civilization built on order, agriculture, and meticulous record-keeping had developed a relationship with cannabis that was not one of ecstatic release, but of profound pragmatism. Here, the plant was known not as a key to a spirit world, but as a source of fibre, food, and medicine. For thousands of years, the primary value of the cannabis plant, known in Chinese as ma, was its sheer utility. It was one of the earliest cultivated crops, a fundamental building block of their society. We can imagine the slow, seasonal work of the Chinese farmer, methodically planting the seeds in prepared fields. The plant would grow tall and vigorous, its slender stalks reaching for the sky. After the harvest, a long and laborious process would begin to transform these stalks into usable fibre. The stalks would be soaked in water for weeks, a process called retting, which allowed the soft inner pulp to rot and decay, loosening the tough outer fibres. Once sufficiently soaked, the stalks were removed and beaten, separating the woody core from the long, strong strands of bast fibre. These fibres were then spun into thread, a task often performed by the women of the household, a constant, quiet whirring of spindles. This thread was then woven on simple looms into a durable coarse cloth, used for clothing, sandals, fishing nets, and rope. It was a humble but essential material, the very fabric of daily life. The seeds of the plant were also used, crushed to produce a nutritious oil, or roasted and eaten as a simple grain. In ancient China, before its psychoactive properties were the focus, ma was first and foremost a provider, a plant that clothed and fed the people. But the ancient Chinese, with their keen observational skills, also recognized that the plant held other secrets. This knowledge was systemized by the legendary figure of Shennong, the mythical emperor and divine farmer who is said to have created the first Chinese encyclopedia of medicinal plants, the Pen Cao Qing. In this ancient text, which catalogued hundreds of herbs, ma was included as a medicine. It was described not as a substance for the mind, but as a treatment for the body, for ailments like gout, rheumatism, malaria, and general absent-mindedness. The approach was clinical, aimed at restoring balance and alleviating physical suffering. This medicinal use reached its most remarkable point with the legendary, almost mythical physician Hua Tuo, who lived in the 2nd century CE. He was a figure renowned for his incredible surgical skill in an age when most procedures were impossible due to the excruciating pain they caused. Hua Tuo's secret was an anesthetic powder he invented called mafisan. Let us picture a scene from this ancient time. A patient is brought to Hua Tuo suffering from a grievous internal ailment that requires surgery. The procedure would normally be unthinkable, but Hua Tuo works in a quiet, clean and orderly chamber. He prepares his anesthetic, mixing the finely ground mafisan powder, rich in cannabis resin, with a portion of warmed wine. He gives this mixture to the patient to drink. There is no shamanic chanting, no ecstatic ritual. It is a calm, clinical procedure. The patient drinks the bitter brew, and slowly a profound change comes over them. A deep heaviness settles into their limbs. The world around them softens and recedes. They drift into a state of complete unconsciousness, a deep and dreamless sleep where the body feels nothing. Huatuo described this as a state of numbness and insensibility. With the patient now quiet and still, Huatuo could perform his work. The legends say he conducted complex surgeries, removing diseased sections of intestine and cleansing internal organs, all while the patient remained utterly oblivious to the pain. After the procedure was complete, he would sew the wound and apply a healing salve. The patient would awaken hours later, with no memory of the ordeal, the source of their long suffering having been removed. Whether these accounts are literal truth or embellished legends, they reveal the core of the ancient Chinese approach to this plant. It was a powerful tool in the healer's hand, a substance whose greatest magic was its ability to bring quiet, to bring stillness, and to mercifully separate the mind from the suffering of the body. It was not a path to the heavens, but a path to healing here on earth. Leaving the quiet workshops of the Chinese healers behind, our journey now drifts westward, following the path of the sun until we arrive in another of the world's great ancient landscapes, the fertile valley of the Nile River in Egypt. Here, civilization was not carved out of the forest, but was a direct gift of the river itself. Life was dictated by the Nile's slow, predictable, and life-giving annual flood, the Akhet. Every year the river would swell, depositing a rich, black layer of silt upon the narrow strips of farmland that flanked its banks, creating an agricultural paradise surrounded by an endless sea of red desert. In this land of immense bounty, a different kind of relationship with an intoxicant was forged. It was not based on a rare plant sought for its spiritual power, but on the overflowing abundance of the grain harvest. Here, humanity discovered a quiet, natural magic, a slow transformation that would become central to their civilization. This was the discovery of fermentation, and its first great gift was beer. The birth of beer, or henket as the Egyptians called it, was likely a happy accident. We can imagine a scene from the distant past. A basket woven from reeds, filled with harvested barley or emmer wheat, is left forgotten at the edge of a field. A sudden downpour soaks the grain. In the days that follow, under the warmth of the Egyptian sun, a change begins. The grains begin to sprout, releasing their natural sugars. Wild yeasts, invisible spores drifting in the air, settle upon the sweet, watery mash and begin their silent work. A curious or hungry person, finding this bubbling, porridge-like mixture, might have dared to taste it. They would have found it surprisingly nourishing, slightly sweet, and possessing a strange, pleasant, and calming effect. In that moment, one of history's most important beverages was born, not from a deliberate invention, but from a chance encounter between grain, water, and the patient work of microorganisms. It is crucial to understand that for the ancient Egyptians, beer was not primarily an intoxicant in the way we might think of it today. It was first and foremost a food. The brewing process resulted in a thick, unfiltered, nutritious liquid, often called liquid bread. It was cloudy and full of suspended solids, a vital source of calories, protein, and essential B vitamins for the entire population. It was a cornerstone of their daily diet. Beer was consumed by everyone, from the most powerful pharaoh to the humblest farmer. It was a drink for men, women, and even children, who were often given a weaker, less fermented version. Its importance was so central that it became a form of currency. We can picture the sprawling construction sites of the Giza Plateau, where thousands of labourers worked to build the Great Pyramids. At the end of a long day of cutting and hauling stone, these workers would line up, not for a payment of coin, but for their daily rations, meticulously recorded by a scribe on a papyrus scroll, a set number of loaves of bread and several large jars of beer. This was the fuel that built the most enduring monuments of the ancient world. The brewing process itself was a constant domestic activity, typically overseen by the women of the household. From tomb paintings and archaeological discoveries, we can reconstruct their slow and methodical work. They would begin by sprouting the barley, allowing it to germinate to create malt. This malted grain would then be crushed and formed into lightly baked loaves, a kind of beer bread that could be stored. When it was time to brew, these loaves would be crumbled into large, wide-mouthed clay vats. Water would be added, along with perhaps a handful of dates or a drizzle of honey to add sweetness and aid the fermentation. The mixture would then be left in the warmth of the Egyptian air. Soon, it would begin to bubble and froth as the yeasts went to work. The brewery would be filled with a distinctive sweet and malty aroma. After a few days, the fermentation would slow, and the resulting thick porridge-like beer would be strained and poured into smaller, sealed jars, ready for consumption. This gift of the Nile was so essential that it was woven into the fabric of Egyptian religion itself. It was a common offering placed before the statues of gods in their temples. In the myth of the goddess Hathor, it is beer that saves humanity. When the sun god Ra grows angry with mankind, he sends the fierce lion goddess Sekhmet to destroy them. She rampages across the land until Ra takes pity and concocts a plan. He has thousands of jars of beer brewed and dyed red with ochre to look like blood. This mixture is poured out across the fields. The thirsty Sekhmet, mistaking it for blood, drinks it all, becomes peacefully intoxicated, and transforms back into the gentle and loving goddess Hathor, her rage forgotten. Beer was a force that could soothe even a god's anger, and so it was also a vital provision for the afterlife. Tombs were filled with jars of beer and models of breweries, ensuring the deceased would have an endless supply of their favourite liquid bread to nourish them on their long journey in the hereafter. It was truly the drink of life, and of life eternal. While the Egyptians perfected the art of large-scale brewing to fuel their monumental projects, the very first written records of beer come from their neighbours in Mesopotamia. In the sun-baked plains of ancient Soma, in cities like Ur and Uruk, beer, or kash, was not just a drink. It was a fundamental component of social and religious life, a gift believed to have been passed down from the gods themselves. So central was beer to their culture that they worshipped a goddess specifically dedicated to its creation, Ninkasi. The ancient Sumerians composed a beautiful hymn in her honour, a text that is both a prayer and, remarkably, a detailed recipe for brewing beer. It allows us to step back in time and witness the process through their own words. The hymn speaks with a gentle, flowing rhythm, describing the patient and methodical steps of the brew. The hymn to Ninkasi tells of the flowing water, the foundation of the brew. It speaks of the bapir, the barley bread, which is mixed with honey and spices. It describes the noble dogs who guard the mixture as it is prepared. Then comes the slow, quiet magic of the fermentation vat, which makes a pleasant sound. The hymn details the process of placing the fermented mash onto a large woven reed mat to filter it, collecting the precious liquid in a separate vessel. Ninkasi, the hymn concludes, it is you who pour out the filtered beer of the collector vat. It is like the rush of the Tigris and Euphrates. In Sumerian society, brewing was not the work of large state-run industries, but a craft almost exclusively practiced by women. These women were the first alewives, respected artisans who brewed beer in their own homes or in small dedicated breweries, and often ran the taverns where it was consumed. Let us imagine one of these establishments in a bustling Sumerian city. It is a simple, earth-brick building with an open doorway leading out onto a dusty street. Inside, the air is cool and dim. People from all walks of life, merchants, labourers, scribes and soldiers, sit on low clay benches. There are no individual mugs or glasses. In the centre of a small group might sit a single large earthenware jar, filled with the thick, unfiltered beer. Each person holds a long drinking straw, often made from a hollow reed, or for the wealthy, a beautiful tube of bronze or even gold. They place their straws into the communal pot, sipping the liquid from beneath the floating layer of grain husks and foam. The atmosphere is not loud or boisterous, but one of quiet, communal relaxation after a long day's work. The role of the alewife was so important that it was even regulated by law. In the famous Code of Hammurabi, written nearly 4,000 years ago, several laws are dedicated to beer and the women who served it. The laws set a fair price for beer, ensuring that brewers did not overcharge their patrons. They even specified that any alewife who overheard talk of treason in her establishment and failed to report it would be put to death, a testament to the tavern's role as a central hub of city life. Just as in Egypt, beer was a staple of the diet and a form of payment. Rations for workers were calculated in quantities of beer. It was a source of calories, a safe alternative to potentially unclean water, and a social lubricant that brought the community together. From the sacred hymns praising its divine birth to the state laws regulating its sale, beer in Mesopotamia was far more than a simple drink. It was a foundational pillar of the world's first urban civilization, brewed with care and consumed with quiet daily reverence. While the great river civilizations built their societies on the solid foundation of grain and beer, the cultures that flourished around the Mediterranean Sea turned their attention to a different plant, a woody, climbing vine that produced a fruit of immense potential. The cultivation of the grapevine, and the art of turning its fruit into wine, became a cornerstone of Greek, and later, Roman life. To understand Roman wine, we must first understand the slow, patient, and cyclical work of the vineyard itself. Let us spend a year on the rolling hills of Campania, at a Roman villa, and watch the seasons turn. Our year begins in the quiet dormancy of Hemes, or winter. The vibrant life of the vineyard is in retreat. The air is cool and often damp. The gnarled vines stand in silent, orderly rows, their branches bare and skeletal against a pale sky. The ground is fallow, and a sense of deep rest hangs over the land. But even in this quiet season, there is essential work to be done. This is the time for pruning. We can imagine a team of labourers, perhaps slaves or tenants of the great villa, moving methodically through the rows. Each one carries a small curved iron hook called a falx vintoria. Their movements are not rushed. They are deliberate and full of knowledge passed down through generations. They approach a vine and study its tangled branches. The task is to decide what must be cut away to ensure the health and productivity of the plant in the year to come. With a swift, clean cut, a dry branch is removed. Another is trimmed back to just 2 or 3 buds. It is a work of foresight and faith, sacrificing the old growth to make way for the new. The clipped branches are gathered into bundles and carried away, to be used for firewood or to mend the very trellises that will support the vines. The air is filled with the crisp, snapping sound of the cuts and the earthy smell of dormant wood. For weeks this slow, patient and essential work continues under the low winter sun. Then comes Ver, the season of spring. A change begins that is at first imperceptible, a subtle warming in the soil, a softening of the air, and then the first sign of life. From the carefully pruned spurs on the vine, tiny woolly buds begin to swell. Soon the vines appear to weep as sap begins to rise from the cuts of winter, a clear liquid that glistens in the morning light. The vineyard is waking up. Within days the buds burst, and the first tiny folded leaves unfurl, a vibrant, almost electric green. The growth in spring is a quiet explosion of life. The main work now is to protect this tender new growth from late frosts and to begin training it. Labourers move through the rows again, this time gently tying the new, flexible shoots to the supporting stakes or trellises, guiding them upwards towards the sun. The vineyard is no longer a collection of stark lines, but is slowly being filled with a soft green haze. Spring gives way to esters, or summer. The days are now long, hot and dry. The sun beats down on the Italian hills. The vines are lush and full, a dense canopy of broad green leaves. Hidden beneath the leaves, the grapes themselves have formed, starting as small, hard, green pellets in tight bunches. The work of the vineyard now becomes a delicate balancing act. The farmers practice what we would now call canopy management. They move through the vines, selectively plucking leaves to allow the sunlight to reach the grape bunches, helping them to ripen. but they must also leave enough foliage to protect the delicate fruit from being scorched by the relentless midday sun. It is a task of constant adjustment, creating the perfect interplay of light and shade for each plant. The air in the vineyard is heavy and still, filled with the low hum of bees and the dusty scent of the dry earth. Finally, as summer's fierce heat begins to soften, we enter autumnus, the season of autumn. This is the time of the vendemmia, the grape harvest, the culmination of the entire year's labour. A remarkable transformation occurs in the vineyard. The grapes undergo veraison, the onset of ripening. The hard, acidic green berries begin to soften. Their colour changes from green to a deep, dusty purple, or a rich, burnished red, or a pale, translucent gold. The sugars within the fruit increase with every day of autumn sun, and a sweet, wine-like fragrance begins to drift through the rows. The harvest itself is a period of intense communal work. Everyone is called to the fields, slaves, tenants, and sometimes hired labourers from nearby towns. They move through the rows with baskets and sharp knives. The sound is not of machines, but of human activity. The low murmur of voices, the metallic snip of the knife, cutting through the thick stem of a bunch, and the soft, heavy sound of the grapes being laid gently into a woven basket. The full baskets, heavy with the year's bounty, are carried on shoulders to the villa's pressing floor. The grapes are poured into a large stone basin. Here, workers, often barefoot, will tread the grapes in a slow, rhythmic dance, their feet stained purple with the juice. The sweet liquid, the must, flows through channels into collection vats. The year of slow, patient and quiet work in the vineyard is over. But for the grape, the journey has just begun. Its next transformation, from simple fruit to complex wine, will take place in the cool, quiet darkness of the cellar. The year of patient work in the vineyard has reached its culmination. The air of the villa is thick with the sweet, sticky scent of the freshly pressed grape juice, the must. This vibrant, unfermented liquid, the pure essence of the harvest, is now carried from the pressing floor to begin the next stage of its journey. We descend now into the cellar vineria, the wine cellar. The atmosphere here is a world away from the bright heat outside. The air is cool, still, and heavy with the smell of damp earth, clay, and the sharp, fruity aroma of fermentation already in progress. It is a quiet, subterranean space, a sanctuary of slow transformation. And this space is dominated by enormous vessels, the silent workhorses of the Roman winery. These are the dolia. Imagine massive, globular earthenware jars, some standing taller than a person, their wide mouths open to the cool air. They are too large to be moved easily, so they are often permanently fixed in place, sometimes buried halfway into the earthen floor of the cellar. This use of the earth itself helps to maintain a constant, stable temperature, which is crucial for the delicate process that is about to begin. The fresh grape must is poured into these enormous jars. For the first stage of its life as wine, the dolium is left open to the air, and soon a quiet miracle begins. Wild yeasts, invisible organisms that have been patiently waiting on the skins of the grapes, awaken in the sugary liquid. They begin their work. The surface of the must comes alive. It starts with a gentle fizzing, a soft whispering hiss that echoes in the quiet cellar. As the fermentation becomes more vigorous, it begins to bubble and froth, a thick churning foam or cap forming on the surface. The cellar is now filled with a constant, gentle, bubbling sound, the audible proof of the wine's creation. The sweet smell of the grape juice is slowly joined by the sharper, more pungent aroma of alcohol. For several days or weeks, the wine is a living, breathing thing, churning with its own internal energy. As the most vigorous phase of fermentation subsides, and the bubbling begins to quiet, the vintner must intervene. The young wine is now full of sediment, dead yeast cells, grape seeds, and tiny bits of skin, which have settled into a thick layer at the bottom of the dolium. This sediment is called the lees. If left for too long, it can spoil the taste of the wine. So begins the careful process of racking. With a siphon, often a simple reed or a metal tube, the young, cloudy wine is carefully drawn off from the top of the dolium, leaving the heavy layer of lees behind. It is a slow and delicate task, requiring a steady hand to avoid disturbing the sediment. This process might be repeated several times over many weeks, with each racking leaving the wine clearer and more stable. Once the wine is sufficiently clear, it is ready for the next stage of its life, aging. For this, it is transferred into a different kind of vessel, one that has become an iconic symbol of the ancient world, the amphora. Unlike the squat, immense dolia, amphorae are taller and more slender. They are clay vessels with two handles near the top and a distinctive pointed base. This pointed bottom was not a design flaw, it was practical. It allowed the jars to be easily wedged into soft ground for stability, or nested together efficiently in sand-filled racks in the cellar or in the ballast of a cargo ship. Each amphora was often a document in itself. Before firing, a stamp might be pressed into the clay, indicating the estate where the wine was made. After being filled, a small clay tablet or a painted inscription would be added noting the names of the year's consuls, the Roman equivalent of the vintage year, and sometimes the type of wine within. It was an ancient wine label. The young wine is poured into the amphorae, and then they are sealed shut with a stopper of clay or plaster. To make them completely airtight for the long aging process, the stopper and the rim were often coated with pitch, a black, sticky resin made from pine trees. This resin would not only seal the jar, but would also impart its own distinct piney flavour to the wine, a taste that survives today in Greek Retsina. Sealed in their clay cocoons, the amphorae are laid to rest in the cool, silent darkness of the cellar. Here, time itself becomes the final ingredient. For months, or often for years, the wine is left to age. The sharp, raw flavours of its youth begin to soften. The different chemical compounds within the liquid slowly interact, creating a deeper, richer, and more complex character. Sometimes the Romans would try to speed up this process. Certain cellars had a room called a fumarium built above the villa's hearth. Amphorae would be stored in this smoke-filled room, and the gentle heat would accelerate the aging process, giving the wine a smoky, mature flavour in a fraction of the time. From a sun-ripened fruit, to a bubbling, living liquid, to a still and silent beverage resting in the earth, the journey of the wine is now complete. It has become a celebrated and essential part of Roman life, a drink of civilization, born from the patient art of the vineyard and the quiet, transformative magic of the amphora. From the boisterous energy of the grape press and the bubbling life of the fermentation vat, our story now shifts to a much quieter and more introspective corner of the ancient world. We move from the drink of social cohesion to a plant that was revered for its power to grant a solitary peace. In the same sun-drenched lands that gave us wine, another flower flourished, one whose beauty was matched only by the profound and mysterious power held within it. This was the opium poppy, Papaver somniferum, a name given to it by the great botanist Linnaeus centuries later, a name that translates perfectly to the sleep-bringing poppy. Let us picture the plant itself standing in a field under the warm Aegean sun. It is an unassuming annual, growing from a tiny seed in the spring. Its stem is slender, a pale silvery green, and sometimes covered in a fine, downy hair. Its leaves are delicate and lobed, with a soft, almost ethereal blue-green hue, their edges ruffled like a piece of fine lace. For much of its life it is an unremarkable plant, blending in with the wild grasses and other flora of the landscape. But then, as the season turns towards summer, it prepares for its moment of glory. At the top of its slender stem, a single bud forms. For days it hangs its head, bent over as if heavy with sleep, or perhaps in a gesture of deep humility. Then, one morning, the bud lifts its head towards the sun, and its protective green sheath falls away, allowing the petals to unfurl. The flower of the opium poppy is a vision of fragile beauty. Its 4 broad petals are as thin and delicate as crumpled silk or the finest paper. They can be a brilliant pure white, like a fresh fall of snow. They can be a soft, gentle lavender or a pale, blushing pink. Or they can be a deep, dramatic scarlet, often with a dark, velvety blotch of purple or black at their base. In the centre sits a complex crown of stamens surrounding the small, pale green ovary that holds the plant's future. The flower's life is brief. It dances in the warm breeze for only a few days before, one by one, the delicate petals release their hold and drift to the earth below. What is left behind is the plant's true treasure, the seed pod. It is a pale green, globe-like vessel, perfectly smooth and cool to the touch, and sitting atop it is a distinctive star-shaped waxy crown. This pod is a vessel of duality. Inside it holds hundreds of tiny black seeds, the promise of the next generation of flowers. But the skin of the pod itself holds the secret that the ancient world so deeply valued, a thick, milky, potent latex. The ancient Greeks and Romans, seeing this plant and understanding its power, wove it deeply into their mythology. They associated its ability to induce a deep and profound sleep with their gods of the night. Hypnos, the Greek personification of sleep, was often depicted as a gentle young man carrying stalks of poppies, or with a crown of poppies woven into his hair. It was believed that he would drift through the world at night, using a poppy stem to touch the eyes of weary mortals, granting them the gift of rest and temporary escape from their troubles. His twin brother was Thanatos, the personification of peaceful death. The two were inseparable, and so the poppy also became a symbol of eternal rest. Its power to bring a sleep so deep that it resembled death made it a sacred plant of passage, a flower of quiet farewell. It was often carved onto gravestones and funerary monuments, a symbol of a serene journey into the final, dreamless sleep. And the poppy was also the key to the realm of dreams, presided over by Hypnos' son, Morpheus. It was Morpheus who would shape the visions of sleepers, and the poppy was the gatekeeper to his fantastical world. But the poppy was not only a symbol of darkness and slumber, it was also tied to Demeter, the great goddess of the harvest and agriculture. The story tells that when her beloved daughter Persephone was abducted into the underworld, Demeter's grief was so immense that she neglected her duties, and the earth became barren. No crops would grow, and humanity faced starvation. Taking pity on her, the gods offered her the poppy. She drank a brew made from it and finally fell into a deep sleep, allowing her to forget her profound sorrow, if only for a little while. With her grief temporarily quieted, she was able to restore fertility to the earth. In this way, the poppy was also seen as a symbol of renewal, a medicine for even the deepest grief, and a necessary component for the continuation of life itself. This beautiful flower, so steeped in the mythology of sleep, dreams, and the quiet turning of the seasons, held its practical earthly power hidden within its pale green pod. But to unlock that power, to draw out the potent milky latex, required not a myth or a prayer, but a meticulous and delicate human process. It required the patient harvest. The beauty of the poppy flower and the rich mythology surrounding it were reflections of the profound power held within the plant. But this power did not offer itself freely. To draw out the potent milky latex from the poppy's seed pod was not a simple task of picking or gathering. It was a delicate and demanding form of agriculture, an art that required immense patience, a steady hand, and a deep understanding of the plant's quiet rhythms. The work began at a very specific time of day, the late afternoon, as the sun began its descent and the air started to cool. In the low golden light of twilight, the harvesters would move into the fields. They were not rushed. Their movements were economical and practiced, born from generations of accumulated knowledge. Each harvester carried a special tool, a small knife that was not designed for cutting, but for scoring. Often this tool would have 3 or 4 small sharp blades set parallel to each other, allowing for several precise incisions to be made at once. They would approach a single poppy plant, its flowers having already shed their delicate petals days before. They would be looking for a pod at the perfect stage of ripeness, no longer freshly formed, but not yet dry and brittle. It had to be a particular shade of pale, bluish-green, swollen and heavy on its slender stem. Holding the pod gently but firmly in one hand to keep it steady, the harvester would take the scoring tool in the other. Then, with a single, fluid, and incredibly controlled motion, they would draw the sharp blades across the waxy skin of the pod. The incisions were an art form in themselves. They had to be deep enough to pierce the outer layer and release the latex, but not so deep as to puncture the inner chamber, where the seeds were developing. Such a mistake would spoil the pod and the precious liquid within. The moment the blades passed, a remarkable transformation would begin. From the fine, almost invisible lines of the cuts, a thick, milky white sap would begin to well up. It would ooze slowly, like brilliant white tears forming tiny droplets on the green skin of the pod. The air would fill with a strange, sharp and verdant smell. The harvester would not wait to collect this liquid. They would simply perform their delicate task and move on to the next pod, and the next, and the next. Their work was a slow, repetitive and almost hypnotic dance through the field as the light faded. Behind them, they left rows upon rows of gently weeping poppy pods, each one bleeding its potent, milky secret into the cooling night air. They would leave the fields in the twilight, abandoning their harvest to the darkness. For now, their work was done. It was the night itself that would perform the next stage of the alchemy. Through the long, cool hours, the white latex, exposed to the air, would slowly begin to congeal. The liquid would thicken, and its colour would transform, the pure white oxidizing into a dark reddish-brown, almost black sticky gum. The poppy's tears would harden into a precious resin. At the first light of dawn, while the air was still cool and damp with dew, the harvesters would return. In the gentle morning sun, they could now see the results of their previous day's labour. Dark, sticky beads of dried resin clinging to the fine score marks on each pod. Now began the second phase of the harvest, the collection. For this they used a different tool, often a simple iron or bronze scraper, curved like a small spoon or trowel. Once again moving with a slow and patient rhythm, they would go from pod to pod. With a delicate touch, they would use the scraper to gently lift and peel the sticky bead of raw opium from the skin of the pod. It was painstaking work. They had to be careful not to scrape off bits of the plant's skin, or to let the sticky resin fall to the dusty ground below. Slowly, over many hours, their collection pots would begin to fill with the dark, pungent and valuable gum. This was the raw opium of the ancient world, a substance harvested with immense care, through a 2-day process of delicate wounding and patient gathering. This dark, sticky resin, the product of so much quiet labour, was not a commodity for a bustling marketplace. It was a powerful and sacred medicine, destined for the quiet rooms of the sick and the careful hands of ancient physicians, who saw it as their most potent tool in the timeless struggle against human pain. The dark, sticky resin, scraped with such care from the weeping poppy pods at dawn, was not a substance for the marketplace or the banquet hall. Its journey's end was the quiet study of the physician, the healing temples of the gods, and the bedside of the suffering. In a world without our modern understanding of disease, a world where pain was a constant and formidable adversary, opium was regarded as a near miraculous gift, the ultimate medicine against agony. To understand its importance, we must first picture the world of the ancient physician. It was a world of observation and philosophy. Sickness was often understood as an imbalance of the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The physician's task was to restore this delicate equilibrium through diet, rest, and the careful application of herbal remedies. Within this framework, opium, with its profound and undeniable effects, was seen as a tool of immense power. The first great figure to systemize its use was the Greek physician Hippocrates, who lived in the 4th century BCE and is known to us as the father of medicine. He moved medicine away from pure superstition advocating for the careful observation of symptoms and a belief in natural causes for illness. In his extensive writings, he mentions the juice of the poppy, which he called meconium. He recognized its two most powerful properties, its ability to induce sleep, making it a potent soporific, and its ability to relieve pain, making it a peerless analgesic. He prescribed it for a range of internal diseases and physical pains, establishing its place as a legitimate and essential tool in the physician's arsenal. Centuries later, in the Roman Empire, the physician Galen of Pergamon would build upon this knowledge, becoming the single most influential medical authority in the entire ancient world. Galen was a master of pharmacology, the art of creating complex remedies from dozens of ingredients, and in his extensive work, opium was a star player. He is most famously associated with a compound known as theriac. Imagine this ancient medicine. It was not a simple pill, but a complex, almost magical concoction, a sort of universal antidote and cure-all. Its recipe often contained over 60 different ingredients. There were exotic spices like cinnamon and myrrh, minerals and stranger things like dried viper's flesh. These ingredients would be ground together and mixed into a thick paste with honey. It was a hugely expensive and sought-after remedy, believed to cure everything from poison bites to common ailments. But historians and pharmacologists agree that for all its complexity, the most active and effective ingredient in the entire mixture was opium. It was the opium that dulled the pain, quieted the cough, and allowed the sick patient to find a restorative peace of sleep. The administration of opium was done with care. Raw opium was rarely used on its own. It would be mixed with other ingredients to make it more palatable and to balance its effects. It was often dissolved in a measure of wine, the alcohol acting as a solvent and adding its own calming properties. For other ailments, it was mixed with honey or fat to create a poultice that could be applied externally to reduce swelling and local pain. Its power to bring sleep was also woven into the religious healing practices of the time. Let us imagine a patient suffering from a chronic illness, making a journey to a healing temple, an Asclepieion, dedicated to the god of medicine, Asclepius. The temple would be a serene and beautiful place, often built near a sacred spring or a quiet grove of trees. After making an offering to the god, the patient would prepare for the central ritual of their healing, temple sleep. They would lie down on a cot in a special quiet dormitory within the temple grounds, a space called the abaton. The hope was that as they slept, the god Asclepius himself would visit them in their dreams, perhaps offering a vision that would reveal the cure for their ailment, or even performing a miraculous act of divine surgery as they slept. To aid in this process, the temple priest would likely have administered a calming drink to the patient, a brew of soothing herbs mixed with wine and almost certainly a dose of opium. The poppy's power would quiet the patient's anxious mind, ease the pain of their body, and guide them down into a deep and profound state of sleep. In this state, the boundaries between the physical world and the dream world would blur, making them more receptive to the healing vision they so desperately sought. From the methodical writings of Hippocrates to the complex remedies of Galen, and within the quiet, sacred sleep of the healing temples, opium was a constant presence in the classical Mediterranean. It was the ultimate mercy, a botanical key that could lock the door on pain and suffering, allowing the body and mind to find the stillness required for healing. While the Old World found this profound power in the delicate poppy, across the vast ocean, the peoples of the New World had found their own sacred leaf, used not to quiet the body, but to speak to the heavens. As the physicians of the Greco-Roman world were finding solace from physical suffering in the milk of the poppy, on the other side of the world, a vast and vibrant continent held a different plant at the centre of its spiritual life. In the Americas, long before the arrival of European ships, dozens of distinct cultures, from the great forests of the east to the sweeping grasslands of the plains, shared a profound reverence for a broad-leafed plant they had cultivated for thousands of years. This was tobacco. To understand its role, we must first set aside all modern notions of its use. For the indigenous peoples of the Americas, tobacco was not a recreational habit or a simple pleasure. It was a sacred herb, a divine gift, and a powerful spiritual tool. In many creation stories, it is one of the first plants given to humanity by the Creator, a special medium through which humans could communicate directly with the spirit world. Its power was not seen as a chemical effect on the body, but as an inherent holy essence. The focus of this power was not on the leaf itself, but on the smoke it produced. Imagine a council of elders sitting in a circle under a wide and endless sky. A pipe is lit. The smoke that rises is not an idle exhalation. It is seen as a visible prayer, a fragrant ethereal messenger carrying the thoughts, the thanks, the hopes, and the promises of the people up to the heavens, delivering their words directly to the ears of the Creator and the spirits. The smoke was a bridge between the physical world and the sacred world. This sacred leaf was also a powerful agent of peace and truth. In diplomatic councils between different nations, or in important tribal meetings, the sharing of a pipe was the most solemn of oaths. To smoke together was to enter into a sacred space, a truce where all participants were bound to speak with an honest heart and an open mind. The smoke was believed to clear the air both literally and figuratively, driving away any lingering anger or deceit, and allowing for clear and truthful communication. An agreement sealed by the sharing of a pipe was more binding than any written treaty. The cultivation of this sacred plant was done with intention and care. The specific species varied by region, but it was often a potent variety, far stronger than modern commercial tobacco. The seeds were planted in dedicated gardens, and the broad green leaves were tended throughout the season. After harvesting, the leaves were bundled and hung to dry in special lodges or in the shade of a dwelling. This was a slow curing process that could take many weeks, essential for developing the deep, rich aroma and proper character for ceremonial use. Often, the pure tobacco was not smoked alone. It was blended with other plants into a mixture known as kinnikinnick. The ingredients would vary based on the traditions of the tribe and the purpose of the ceremony. The dried inner bark of the red willow might be added for its pleasant aroma. The leaves of the bearberry plant or the bark of the dogwood tree could also be included. Each ingredient was gathered with respect and added to the tobacco to create a specific traditional blend, a recipe passed down through generations. The ritual of its use was slow and deliberate. Let us picture that council of elders once more. The pipe, the central object of the ceremony, is brought forth. Before it is lit, it is held up with great reverence. The leader of the ceremony offers the stem of the pipe to the sky above, acknowledging the Sky Father or the Great Spirit. He then touches it to the ground, honouring Mother Earth. He then points the stem to the 4 cardinal directions, to the rising sun in the east, the warm winds of the south, the setting sun in the west, and the cold winds of the north. This act acknowledges the entire cosmos, inviting all of creation to be a witness to their proceedings. Only after these offerings are made is the pipe lit. The leader takes a gentle puff, not inhaling deeply, but allowing the smoke to fill his mouth before offering it back to the sky. Then, the pipe is passed around the circle, always in a sunwise direction, from one person to the next. A profound and respectful silence often fills the space between each person's turn. This shared rhythmic act of smoking from a single sacred vessel created a powerful bond of unity, peace, and truth. The power of this ritual was centered not just in the sacred leaf, but in the physical object used to smoke it. The pipe itself was an item of immense craftsmanship and spiritual significance, an altar that could be held in the hand. And to truly understand the depth of this ceremony, we must now turn our attention to the slow and patient art of its creation. The power of the sacred tobacco ritual was not contained in the leaf alone. It was channeled through and embodied by the ceremonial pipe itself. The calumet, as it was known by many, was far more than a simple instrument for smoking. It was a living sacred entity, a powerful symbol of connection and a physical representation of the cosmos. Its creation was not a task of manufacturing, but an act of prayer, a slow and patient art form where every material and every action was imbued with deep, spiritual meaning. The pipe was made of two distinct parts, the bowl and the stem, which were often stored separately and only joined together at the moment a ceremony was to begin. Each part represented a fundamental principle of the universe. The bowl represented the earth, fertility, and the female principle. The stem represented the sky, the heavens, and the male principle. The joining of the two was a symbolic act of creation, bringing the universe into a state of perfect balance and unity. Let us first consider the creation of the bowl. For the most sacred pipes, particularly among the tribes of the Great Plains, the material of choice was a special stone known as catlinite. We can imagine a small group of men making a long, arduous journey to the sacred quarry, located in what is now southwestern Minnesota. This site was considered neutral ground, a place of peace where even enemy nations could come without fear of conflict to gather the precious stone. The work of quarrying was slow and difficult. The catlinite lay in a relatively thin layer, buried beneath a much harder stratum of rock quartzite. Using simple hand tools, mauls and wedges made of stone and wood, the men would painstakingly chip away the hard outer rock to expose the softer, reddish stone beneath. Once a suitable block of this pipestone was quarried, the artisan would begin his work. The stone itself was unique. When fresh from the earth, it is soft and easy to carve, with a texture almost like soap. We can picture the pipe maker sitting quietly, holding the rough block in his hands. He would not rush. He would study the stone, feeling its weight and texture. Then, with a simple knife or a piece of sharp flint, he would begin the slow process of shaping it. He would scrape and carve away the excess stone, his movements patient and precise. The shavings of red stone would fall away like dust. The bowl would gradually emerge from the block, perhaps in the simple, elegant T-shape common to the plains, or perhaps as an effigy, intricately carved to resemble a sacred animal like a bear or a bison. Once the outer shape was formed, he would begin the even more delicate task of drilling the hollow for the tobacco and the small hole to connect it to the stem. This required immense skill to avoid cracking the fragile stone. Finally, he would spend many hours polishing the finished bowl with fine sand and water, then rubbing it with fat or wax until it achieved a deep, lustrous, reddish-brown sheen. The creation of the pipe stem was an art form in its own right. The wood was carefully chosen, often from the ash tree for its straight grain, or from sumac, which has a soft pith in its centre that is easy to remove. The artisan would select a straight, slender branch of the appropriate length. The next step was the most difficult, creating the smoke channel. This was an incredibly patient process. We can imagine the pipe maker sitting by a fire for hours, heating a long, thin wire or rod in the embers until it glowed red. He would then carefully push the hot wire into the centre of the soft pith, burning his way through, bit by bit. He would have to work with immense precision, pulling the wire out repeatedly to clean it, sighting down the length of the stem to ensure the hole remained perfectly straight and centred. To drill a clean, open channel through a 3-foot length of wood using this method could take days of focused, repetitive work. Once the channel was complete, the stem became a canvas for sacred decoration. This was not for mere beauty, but to imbue the pipe with its spiritual power. Long, intricate patterns were created using porcupine quills, which were softened, dyed in brilliant colours using berries and roots, flattened, and then woven and stitched onto the stem. Each geometric pattern held a specific meaning. Feathers were often attached, particularly the sacred feathers of the eagle, which were believed to carry prayers directly to the Creator. Plumes of horsehair, strips of fur, and intricate beadwork could also be added, each element a part of the pipe's story, a physical representation of the owner's identity, their visions, and their connection to the spirit world. When the two pieces were finally brought together, the cool, earthy stone of the bowl and the long decorated wood of the stem, the pipe was complete. It was more than an object. It was a living symbol of the cosmos, a portable altar, and the most powerful tool for creating peace and speaking truth known to its people. It was an instrument of profound connection, ready for the sacred leaf. Our journey now takes us south, leaving the temperate climates behind and plunging into the deep, humid heart of the South American rainforest. This is a world teeming with an almost unimaginable diversity of life, a world where the air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying flowers, and the night is filled with a symphony of a million unseen insects and distant animal calls. The great jungle canopy creates a permanent state of twilight on the forest floor, a green, quiet, and sacred world. For thousands of years, the indigenous peoples who made their homes in this vast living pharmacy learned its secrets. They came to understand the properties of countless plants, for food, for building materials, for poisons, for their hunting darts, and for medicine. But among these thousands of plants, they identified a select few that held a different kind of power, a power not just to heal the body, but to open the mind to the world of spirits. And from these, they created a brew of profound spiritual significance. In the Quechua language, it is called Ayahuasca, which translates to the vine of the soul, or the vine of the dead. Unlike any substance we have yet encountered, Ayahuasca is not a single plant. It is a combination, a sacred marriage of at least two different plants that, on their own, would not produce the visionary state so central to Amazonian shamanism. The discovery of this specific combination is one of the greatest botanical miracles in human history. The first and primary ingredient is the ayahuasca vine itself, Banisteriopsis caapi. Imagine a large woody liana, its trunk gnarled and knotted like an ancient rope, climbing high into the rainforest canopy, connecting the forest floor to the light above. The shamans or curanderos who use it say that this vine contains the strength and the spirit of the brew. On its own, its effects are subtle. It acts as a key. The second ingredient is the leaf of a shrub that grows in the jungle's understory, typically the Psychotria viridis, or chacruna. The leaves of this plant are filled with a powerful visionary compound. However, if a person were to simply chew or make a tea from these leaves, nothing would happen. A specific enzyme in the human stomach immediately finds and destroys this compound, rendering it completely inactive when taken orally. And this is where the quiet miracle occurs. The ayahuasca vine, the key, contains compounds that temporarily switch off that protective enzyme in the stomach. When brewed together, the vine opens the door, allowing the visionary power of the chacruna leaves to enter the body and the mind. Out of the tens of thousands of plants in the Amazon, ancient peoples, through some unknown process of shamanic discovery, figured out that only by combining this specific vine with this specific leaf could the sacred vision be unlocked. The preparation of the brew is a slow and sacred process. We can picture a shaman venturing into the deep jungle to gather the plants. He would not simply take them, but would ask permission from the plant spirits, often leaving a small offering of tobacco in return. He would select a mature length of the ayahuasca vine and carefully gather a bundle of the fresh green chacruna leaves. Back in a clearing, the work would begin. Using a heavy wooden mallet, the shaman would pound the woody vine, striking it again and again until its tough fibres were separated and softened, making its essence accessible. This rhythmic pounding might go on for an hour or more, a percussive prayer echoing through the trees. Then, in a large clay pot or metal cauldron, the two plants would be brought together. A layer of the pounded vine, a layer of the fresh leaves, another layer of vine, another of leaves, until the pot was full. Water would be added to cover the plants, and the cauldron would be placed over a carefully tended fire. For many hours, sometimes from sunrise to sunset, the brew would be simmered. It is never boiled, but kept at a low, gentle heat. The shaman would stay with the brew, tending the fire, and often singing the sacred songs, the Icaros, directly into the rising steam, infusing the mixture with his intention and spiritual energy. Over the long day, the water would slowly evaporate, and the liquid would become thicker and darker, a reddish-brown, earthy and bitter-smelling tea. This finished brew, the physical embodiment of a profound botanical mystery, was considered one of the most powerful tools in the shamanic world. It was not for recreation. It was a sacred medicine, a visionary doorway used only in a ceremonial context under the guidance of an experienced healer to diagnose illness, to commune with the spirits of nature, and to guide the soul on its long and mysterious journey. While the shamans of the Amazon were brewing the visionary vine of the soul, and the priests of the old world were preparing their sacred libations, a new category of plant-based substances began its slow journey towards the heart of Europe. These were not intoxicants that offered escape or transcendence, but stimulants that promised the very opposite: focus, clarity, and a sharpened mind. The first of these to arrive was a dark, bitter, and aromatic bean that would change the course of European social and intellectual life forever. This was coffee. The story of coffee begins not in Europe, but in the distant cloud-wreathed highlands of Ethiopia. The most enduring legend of its discovery is a simple, pastoral tale. It tells of a goat herder named Kaldi, who, many centuries ago, was watching his flock. He noticed that after eating the bright red berries from a particular unfamiliar shrub, his goats became exceptionally energetic, prancing and dancing with a strange vigour late into the night. Curious, Kaldi tried the berries himself and felt a similar wave of alertness and energy wash over him. He brought his discovery to a local monastery, where the abbot, after some initial scepticism, found that a drink made from the roasted beans could help him and his monks stay awake and focused through their long hours of nocturnal prayers. The secret of the coffee bean began to spread. From Ethiopia, the cultivation of coffee crossed the Red Sea into Yemen and the broader Arab world. Here it became a cherished beverage, and its use was first popularized by Sufi mystics, who found its stimulating properties perfect for their own long nights of devotional chanting and meditation. It was in the great cities of the Middle East, in Cairo, Damascus and Constantinople, that the first public coffee houses, or kafekhane, were born. For a long time, coffee remained a secret of the Islamic world, but by the early 17th century, through the bustling trade routes of the Venetian Republic, the first small sacks of these strange, dark beans began to arrive in Europe. At first, it was treated as a curiosity, a medicine sold in apothecaries for a high price. But soon, the Venetian merchants, having seen the coffee houses of the East, imported the idea itself. And so, a new type of social institution was born in Europe, one that would become the epicenter of the new intellectual age. Let us step inside one of these first coffee houses in 17th century London. The experience is first one of aroma. The air is thick with a smell entirely new to the city. The rich, bitter, and powerful scent of roasting coffee beans, mingled with the sweet, fragrant smoke from the clay tobacco pipes we have already discussed. The atmosphere is a stark contrast to the common tavern. The tavern, fueled by beer and wine, was a place of loud songs, boisterous games, and often drunken disorder. The coffee house is a place of quiet energy. The dominant sound is not laughter, but the low, constant and serious hum of conversation. The space is filled with simple wooden tables and benches, the patrons leaning in, speaking in earnest but measured tones. These establishments quickly became known as penny universities. For the price of a single penny, which bought a small cup of coffee, a person could gain entry, take a seat, and listen for hours to the most brilliant and informed discussions of the day. Here, merchants would gather to discuss shipping news and the price of goods. Scientists and thinkers from the newly formed Royal Society would debate new theories of astronomy and physics. Political writers would hash out radical ideas in pamphlets that would be passed from hand to hand. It was a place of business, of news, of intellectual ferment. The coffee itself was not what we might recognise today. It was prepared in the Turkish style. The beans were ground into a fine powder, which was then boiled with water and sugar in a small pot. The resulting liquid was poured, grounds and all, into a small cup. It was dark, thick, strong and gritty. One had to learn to sip it slowly, allowing the fine sediment to settle at the bottom. This new, bitter beverage was the perfect fuel for the dawning age of enlightenment. Unlike alcohol, which dulled the senses, coffee sharpened them. It promoted sobriety, wakefulness, and rational thought. It allowed for long hours of focused work, of detailed financial calculation, and of reasoned debate. The quiet, aromatic, and intellectually charged atmosphere of the coffee house was where the modern world of business, science, and politics began to take shape, one small, stimulating cup at a time. While the coffee houses of Europe were filling with the sounds of earnest debate and commerce, on the other side of the world, another culture was perfecting a ritual around a different stimulating beverage. In Japan, the consumption of tea had been elevated into a unique art form, a meditative practice known as chanoyu, or the way of tea. This was not about simple refreshment or social energy. It was a quiet, choreographed journey towards achieving a moment of pure, uncluttered presence. The philosophy that underpins the tea ceremony is rooted in Zen Buddhism and can be described by the concept of wabi-sabi. This is a worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and the appreciation of imperfection. It is about finding a profound and serene beauty in things that are humble, rustic, natural, and unadorned. The tea ceremony is the living expression of this idea. The experience begins before one even enters the tea room. To reach it, a guest must first walk along a simple garden path called the roji. The path is often laid with uneven stones and lined with moss. Walking this path is a form of meditation, a way to consciously leave the noise and concerns of the outside world behind, cleansing the mind with each deliberate step. The entrance to the tea house, the shashitsu, is often a small, low opening called the nijiriguchi. It is so low that guests cannot walk through it upright. They must bow their heads and crawl inside. This act is deeply symbolic. It forces humility upon all who enter, regardless of their social rank, be they a powerful samurai or a simple merchant. Inside the tea room, all are equal. The room itself is a sanctuary of simplicity. The floors are covered with soft tatami mats. The walls are often made of a simple earthen plaster. Light is diffused softly through paper shoji screens. There is no ornate decoration. The only objects of beauty are found in a small alcove called the tokonoma. Here might hang a single, simple scroll of calligraphy, or a single, perfect flower in a modest vase. The entire space is designed to calm the senses and focus the mind. The tools used in the ceremony, the dog, are not merely functional. They are objects of art chosen with immense care by the host, each one valued for its history, its texture, and its subtle beauty. There is the tea bowl, the chawan. It is often a rustic piece of ceramic, perhaps slightly asymmetrical, its glaze imperfect. It is cherished not in spite of these imperfections, but because of them. It is chosen for the way it feels in the hands, its warmth, its texture. There is the tea whisk, the chasen, carved by a master artisan from a single piece of bamboo. Its 80 or 100 delicate tines designed to whip the tea into a fine froth. And the tea scoop, the chashaku, also a slender piece of bamboo, often bearing a poetic name given to it by its creator. And there is the iron kettle, the kama sitting on a brazier or in a sunken hearth. As it heats the water for the tea, it makes a gentle, simmering sound. This sound is considered a vital part of the ceremony's atmosphere, a sound which poets have likened to the quiet sigh of the wind blowing through a pine forest. The ceremony itself is a slow, graceful, and precise choreography. Every movement the host makes is deliberate, economical, and polished by centuries of tradition. There are no wasted gestures. The host begins by ceremonially purifying the tools. They use a folded silk cloth, the fukusa, to wipe the tea scoop and the tea caddy in a series of exact prescribed movements. This is a meditation on cleanliness and purity. Then, the host takes the bamboo scoop and measures out a small amount of matcha, a vibrant, jade green, finely powdered green tea, and places it into the tea bowl. A ladle of hot water is taken from the iron kettle and poured into the bowl. Now comes the whisking. Holding the bowl steady, the host takes the bamboo whisk and, with a quick and precise motion of the wrist, whips the tea and water together. The fine tines of the whisk move back and forth, creating a soft scratching sound against the ceramic bowl. Slowly, a thick creamy froth, the colour of new moss, forms on the surface of the tea. The prepared bowl is then presented to the guest of honour. The guest receives it, bowing. They lift the bowl in a gesture of gratitude and then rotate it slightly in their hands so as to avoid drinking from what is considered its decorative front. They then take a few sips of the warm, thick and slightly bitter tea. The room is filled with a profound and shared silence. The Japanese tea ceremony is more than the drinking of tea. It is a shared moment of presence. It is a quiet rebellion against the noise and complexity of the world. It is a moving meditation designed to help its participants find a single, perfect, and simple moment of tranquility. While the rituals of coffee and tea were creating new centres of social and spiritual life, the quiet medicine of the poppy began a slow and silent journey of its own. Its path was not one of rapid discovery, but of a gradual and methodical spread, carried in the packs of merchants and the books of scholars along the vast interconnected trade routes that linked Europe to the heart of Asia. This is the story of how a Mediterranean flower became a Pan-Asian medicine. The preservation of its knowledge began in the great cities of the Islamic world. After the fall of the Roman Empire, it was Arab and Persian physicians who became the custodians of the classical medical traditions of Greece and Rome. Scholars like the great Avicenna, in his encyclopedic work The Canon of Medicine, meticulously documented the uses of opium, confirming its place as one of the most effective painkillers available to any physician. It was from this centre of learning, from the great libraries of Baghdad and the bustling ports of the Levant, that opium began its long migration eastward. Its journey followed two main paths. The first was the ancient overland route, the legendary Silk Road. Let us imagine a caravan preparing to depart from a city like Damascus. The courtyard of the caravanserai is a scene of organised chaos, filled with the sounds of grumbling camels and the shouts of merchants. Bales of silk, crates of fine glass and barrels of spices are being carefully loaded onto the animals' backs. And among these goods, packed carefully in small protected chests, are hard, dark cakes of raw opium, a high-value, low-volume commodity, more precious than many jewels. Then the long journey begins. The caravan moves as a single entity, a slow, plodding river of life across a vast and arid landscape. For weeks and months, the pace is dictated by the steady rhythmic gait of the camels. The days are filled with a profound silence, broken only by the wind and the soft padding of feet on sand and rock. The nights are spent in roadside inns, or caravanserais, simple fortified structures that offered safety and water along the arduous route. Through the great cities of Persia and the mountain passes of Central Asia, the opium travelled. It eventually reached India, where it was adopted into the ancient systems of Ayurvedic medicine. Here too it was primarily used as a powerful painkiller, a substance to be respected and administered with care by physicians. From India, the journey continued. Some of the opium would have been carried further east, finally reaching the shores of imperial China. Here, for centuries, it was known as yafong, and it was regarded as a rare and valuable foreign medicine, used in tiny quantities by court physicians to treat the most severe ailments, such as chronic dysentery and excruciating pain. Its use was exclusively medicinal, a potent but respected tool in the physician's chest. The second path of the poppy was the sea. From the ports of the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, Arab trading dhows with their distinctive triangular lateen sails would catch the seasonal monsoon winds. These ships were the workhorses of the great maritime spice trade. We can imagine a dhow, its wooden hull creaking, its hold filled with the fragrant scent of cloves, cinnamon and black pepper, and alongside these spices, stored in the captain's secure cabin, would be a small quantity of medicinal opium. The journey across the Indian Ocean was long and slow, a patient dance with the wind and the currents. The dhows would stop at the bustling trading ports of the Malabar coast in India, and then venture further into the Strait of Malacca and the Spice Islands. In these ports, The opium would be traded alongside all the other goods, a valuable part of a complex global economy. It was through these sea routes that it also found its way to the southern ports of China. For more than 1,000 years, this was the story of opium in Asia. It was a medicine, a valuable trade good, a substance of respect and caution. The later history of opium, and its use as a recreational drug smoked in dens, is a much different, more modern, and more tragic story, one driven by empire and vast commercial interests. But for the purpose of our quiet journey tonight, we will leave opium here, in the apothecary shops and the pharmacopoeias of the medieval East, where it was still regarded as it had been in the time of Hippocrates, a powerful and deeply valued flower of forgetfulness. And so, we have seen how a single plant, born in the fields of the Mediterranean, could have its essence captured and carried across the entire known world, its meaning and use shifting slightly with each new culture it encountered. And so, our quiet exploration comes to an end. We have travelled across continents and millennia, guided by humanity's long and complex relationship with a handful of powerful plants and brews. We began in the mists of prehistory, with the ancient impulse to understand a world where certain plants offered more than just nourishment. They offered a different kind of consciousness. We searched for the identity of the divine Soma in the verses of the Rig Veda, and witnessed the sacred use of cannabis smoke on the vast Eurasian steppes. We saw the same plant used by the careful hand of the Chinese healer to bring quiet and relief from pain. We journeyed to the great river civilizations, where the happy accident of fermentation gave rise to the foundational beverages of beer and wine, substances that were a form of food, a social glue, and a gift to the gods. We stood in the quiet reverence of a Roman vineyard, and in the bustling communal taverns of Sumeria. We witnessed the patient, meticulous harvest of the opium poppy, a flower whose beauty was matched only by its power to grant a merciful sleep and forgetfulness from suffering. We travelled across the ocean to the Americas, and saw how the smoke of the sacred tobacco leaf was not an indulgence, but a visible prayer, a bridge to the spirit world, sealed in a pipe of profound craftsmanship and peace. We ventured deep into the Amazon to understand the botanical miracle of the Ayahuasca brew, the vine of the soul. And we returned to the old world to witness the birth of new social rituals around the stimulating and clarifying drinks of coffee and tea. It has been a journey that shows a universal human desire to connect, to heal, to understand, and to find peace, often through the strange and mysterious power held within the natural world. Each culture found a different key, and each key opened a different door. But now, our journey through time is complete. The stories have all been told. The path has led us back here, to this present moment, to this quiet room. And all that is left is the stillness you have been seeking. There is no more story to follow. There is nothing left to do. The journey is over. All that is left is the quiet. The steady, easy rhythm of your own breath, breathing in and breathing out. Allow your mind to float now. Let go of the words. Let go of the story. There is only the feeling of comfort, of warmth, of safety. The feeling of sinking deeper and deeper into a soft and peaceful place. Letting go now, just drifting. Drifting down into a deep and wonderfully restorative sleep. Peaceful. You can sleep now.